The Volvo V90 has several power options, but they are all powered by the same twin-turbo diesel engine. We did a full review of this power unit. We already have a disassembly on our channel. What do you need to know about this motor? It is really good and reliable. But by 200,000 kilometers it will inevitably begin to be doused with oil. On the one hand, there is nothing criminal, but on the other hand, replacing the valve cover gasket, 31,461,861, will entail replacing everything that is removed to access it. It is advisable to replace the same fuel lines to the injectors with new ones. In general, what people don't really like about this Swedish engine is precisely because it is doused with oil. First of all, from under the valve cover. Also pay attention to the area on the driver's side, under the vacuum pump. The EGR tube located there bursts and allows exhaust gases to escape, and their smell enters the cabin. Exhaust gases can appear under the hood due to a burnt exhaust manifold gasket. There is also a fitting for the steam pipe, which sometimes breaks off and causes an antifreeze leak. Below in this area on cars with a D5 engine, a torn hose of the power pulse system may be found. Through it, air is thrown into the exhaust manifold in front of the turbines to spin them. The pipes before and after the intercooler traditionally sweat along the cuffs and can leak air. With very high mileage, and these Swedish diesel engines run more than 400,000 kilometers without any problems or breakdowns, the intake manifold seam may crack. Overall, that's all. Let us note once again that streams of oil right up to the sump of this engine are a good reason for bargaining and a signal that it is time to properly service the engine. It is better to reduce the timing belt replacement interval, 31,401,542, to 100,000 kilometers, because even the original belt, at 120,000 kilometers for severe conditions, already looks terrible and even breaks. 2.0 T4 190 horsepower, B4204 T31. 2.0 T5 254 horsepower, B4204 T23. 2.0 T6 320 horsepower, B4204 T27. 2.0 T8 hybrid 407 horsepower, B4204 T27. The Volvo V90 also formerly has one gasoline engine, an inline turbo 4, unified with its diesel counterpart. It is almost the same alloy cylinder block with cast iron liners and an open cooling jacket. Also a timing belt drive, 31,401,332, and the belt should also be changed a little earlier, at 100,000 kilometers. Volvo petrol turbo 4s have an electric cooling system pump, 31,368,715. The original one costs about $900 if you can find it, and an analog costs about $300. And we remembered the pump because sometimes it had to be changed after a mileage of 100,000 kilometers, approximately once every 100,000 kilometers. A whistling valve of the valve ventilation system located in the oil trap, 32,140,004, will have to be replaced. The oil catcher is installed on the valve cover. The original one costs about $280. But since the problem is common, non-original manufacturers have already prepared their solutions. Oil traps from $80. There are even valve repair kits for $15, $30. And just like on a diesel engine, the exhaust manifold gasket burns out. The acrid smell of gases will penetrate into the cabin. Gasoline turbo 4s rarely leak oil in the valve cover and generally look dry compared to their diesel counterparts at the same mileage. But this does not apply to the intake tract pipes. Their seals will have to be changed every 80 to 100,000 kilometers. In addition to the turbocharger, the T6 and T8 versions are equipped with a drive supercharger, 36,010,125, which also has no problems. And, most importantly, by the time the V90 model appeared, all these inline gasoline turbo 4s had gotten rid of the problem with oil leakage, which arose after 90,000 kilometers, and the partitions under the oil scraper rings did not break off on the pistons. Roughly speaking, in 2016, tactical restyling of Drive E engines was carried out, which eliminated their most unpleasant disease. Aisin TG-81SC 8-speed automatic transmission. Volvo's automatic transmissions are from the Japanese manufacturer Aisin. 8th Street. The TG-81SC unit is very reliable, with a partial oil change every 50,000 kilometers, that lasts about 400,000 kilometers. During a partial replacement, about 4 liters of oil are drained. The original ATF costs about $30 per liter, 31,256,774. But you can use any oil with Toyota WS approval. Even during the warranty period, these cars had a frequent problem with Freon leaking from the hoses. After a refrigerant leak, the air conditioning compressor began to make serious noise and jammed. All this was changed under warranty. But even on out-of-warranty cars, you need to keep an eye on the hoses. Attention should be paid to the area where the tubes are connected to the hoses. This rolled area is located under the generator. There should be no signs of wetness or fogging on the tubes. As a rule, the low-pressure hose loses its seal, but costs about $100, $32,226,736. The generator, of course, is equipped with an overrunning clutch. It was also often changed under warranty at about 60 to 80,000 km. Moreover, when worn, this clutch slightly fogs up with oil. It is better to replace it in advance before it jams. The original one costs about $230, $31,480,228, and the only analog costs about $30. On the left under the hood of the Volvo V90 there is a small 12-volt battery. It powers the onboard electronics and electric power steering when the engine is switched off with the start-stop system. If, when the engine is stopped by this system, a message appears stating that the power steering servo is temporarily unavailable, then the condition of this small battery, 31,652,780, must be checked. Often it still retains a decent capacity, but its terminals are very oxidized, which disrupts contact with the tips. You can simply clean the terminals and wire tips thoroughly. Most likely the battery itself will last for several more years if the Volvo V90 is equipped with all-wheel drive. The rear axle is connected to the 5th generation Haldex coupling. This clutch needs to be maintained. Change its oil, 31,367,940, every 40,000 kilometers, while removing the pump and washing the plastic nose of its oil intake. This must be done because the electric motor of the pump, 31,367,750, will fail. However, all spare parts for repairing any Haldex are in stock. When changing the oil in the clutch, it is worth assessing the play in the bevel gear. Unfortunately, the angular gearboxes, and specifically the gearbox shaft bearing, have not yet been cured by Volvo engineers. It wears out, resulting in humming and clicking noises. To make the gearbox last longer, you need to change the oil in it too. Pump out the old one through the side plug and fill in new one, 31,259,380. Let's start our review of the suspension parts from the rear. Everything is simple here. Parts of the original suspension, even the stabilizer struts, have been maintained for more than 250,000 kilometers. By the way, the left and right stabilizer links, 31,387,674 and 31,387,675, are different. Replacements cost $15 to $40 apiece, and the original will cost $150. Note that there are no coil springs at the rear. Instead, Volvo engineers used a transverse composite spring. There are no problems with this part at all. It lasts almost forever. Please note that the rear brake pads, 32,233,035, wear out quite quickly when adaptive cruise control is actively used. Original rear brake pads cost $120 a set. Good analogs are 2 to 3 times cheaper. The front suspension of the entire SBA platform has 2 wishbones for each wheel. There are 2 ball joints here. The lower one, 32,221,192, can be changed separately. It costs from $45 to $150 for the original. The upper ball joint only comes complete with a lever, 31,360,836, which costs between $80 and $220. But upper arm silent blocks are offered by non-original suppliers. They cost up to $40 a piece. The most important thing is that this original suspension lasts more than 200,000 kilometers. Only on the 2nd generation XC90 did the ball joints have to be changed up to 150,000 kilometers. There are 3 silent blocks in the lower arm. Non-original silent blocks can be purchased separately. The most expensive and loaded one is the rear silent block, 32,246,809. Its purchase will cost from $90 to $180. Front, $31,451,310 to $90, and shock strut support, $31,360,646, $10 to $40. Optionally, the Volvo V90 was equipped with air suspension. And so far she hasn't caused any trouble. Over 7 to 8 years, Swedish metal has performed well. The paint does not chip, rust does not appear, the headlights and fog lights do not scratch much, do not crack or sweat. Volvo is doing well with this. Although some owners note that scratches appear on the windshield quite quickly, sometimes the servos for opening the trunk lid act up. The interior of modern Volvos is good. The finish does not cause any complaints, nothing creaks even after 200,000 kilometers, the optional panoramic roof does not jam. but its drains must be kept clean. The multimedia system supports Android Auto and CarPlay via wire and only half the screen. But it's better than nothing. Sometimes the buttons on the steering wheel spokes fail on these cars, most often on the right spoke. Button blocks were often replaced under warranty. New buttons are almost impossible to buy. If you need to change them, you can buy an original steering wheel without an airbag at a car wrecker and simply rearrange the buttons from there. Virtual instrument panel, i.e. the display under the visor, sometimes starts to malfunction for no reason at all. It produces an unreadable picture with stripes or pixels, and then turns black forever. It just won't turn on. The reasons for this breakdown are not yet clear, but this mainly applies to cars produced during the quarantine COVID years. A dead panel will have to be replaced with a used one. It will cost a couple of $100s. In winter, these Swedish cars suffer from wet wiring and the control unit, which is located directly in the floor under the driver's seat. Water gets onto the carpet from shoes. The stuck snow melts and flows onto the carpet along the brake pedal. In winter, many new Volvos came to service stations with problems caused by flooding of the control unit. It is strange that Swedish engineers did not foresee such a scenario. Due to the flooding of the electronic unit, it is impossible to turn off the engine, and the entire garland on the instrument panel will light up.